You know that feeling, don't you? When a friend introduces you to a new group of people, and suddenly everyone in that crowd seems just a little bit more appealing than they might have if you'd met them one-on-one.
Oh, definitely. Or maybe you've scrolled through social media, seeing a celebrity with their inner circle.
Right. And they just seem to sparkle even brighter because of who they're surrounded by.
Exactly. It's not just your imagination playing tricks on you. There's a fascinating psychological phenomenon at play here, one that might be subtly shaping how we perceive attractiveness every single day, often without us even realizing it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it.
It really is. What's truly fascinating here is how our visual and cognitive systems process information in a group setting versus when we encounter individuals in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
It genuinely challenges some of our deeply ingrained assumptions about how we make those instant snap judgments of attractiveness. We tend to think attractiveness is an inherent static quality, but the research suggests otherwise.
And for this deep dive, we're unpacking a pretty rich stack of research that explores exactly that. We're looking at everything from pioneering psychological investigations conducted in Western cultures,
The early stuff, yeah.
right up to crucial, eye-opening replications across the globe, specifically in collectivist societies like China.
Which is really important for generalizability.
Absolutely. Our sources meticulously explore a concept popularly known as the cheerleader effect, a term that, yes, actually came from a hit TV show.
It did. How I Met Your Mother. Right.
That's the one. But it has surprisingly robust scientific backing alongside its equally impactful, though perhaps lesser known, cousin, the group attractiveness effect, or GA effect.
Right, the GA effect. Our mission today is basically to define these intriguing concepts for you, explore the origins of the initial research that brought them to light, dive deep into the methodologies and findings of these key studies to understand how scientists figured this out.
The nitty-gritty.
Exactly. Then look at their practical, real-world applications in everything from marketing to dating, and discuss the latest insights into why these effects happen and what exciting directions future research is heading in.
So this is all about giving you a shortcut to being well-informed, equipping you with surprising facts, and hopefully just enough humor to keep you completely hooked on the journey of discovery.
That's the plan.
That really sets the stage, doesn't it? Because it sounds almost too simple to be true that just being in a group can literally make someone or even an entire group appear more attractive.
Yeah, it challenges our intuitive sense of how we judge beauty.
We assume it's all about the individual's features, right? But the science behind it, as you'll soon hear, is incredibly intricate, revealing layers to our perception we rarely consider.
And it's not just about superficial judgments either. It's also deeply connected to a powerful, widespread stereotype that we carry, often subconsciously.
Yeah.
The what is beautiful is good stereotype.
Yes, the halo effect, basically.
Pretty much. This phenomenon, where attractive individuals are often perceived to possess a range of other positive qualities, from being more friendly and intelligent to having more successful careers, and even, some studies suggest, longer life expectancies,
Wow.
plays a vital role in shaping our first impressions. It's particularly pronounced in many Western European and North American cultures, where attractive individuals are often imbued with nearly every positive attribute imaginable, simply based on their looks. But, as we'll see, it appears to be far more universal than initially thought.
Which brings us directly to our first big idea, the group attractiveness effect, or GA effect. This is where a whole group becomes more than the sum of its parts, attractiveness-wise.
Exactly.
So if I'm looking at a team, a band, or just a bunch of friends, the group itself appears more appealing than if I were to mentally average each person's attractiveness. Is that right?
That's precisely it. The core concept of the GA effect is that the perceived physical attractiveness of an entire group is significantly greater than the average attractiveness of its individual members. It defies simple arithmetic.
Right. Intuitively, you might expect that if you were to painstakingly rate each person in a group and then average those scores.
That would represent the group's overall attractiveness.
Yeah. But the research consistently says otherwise. Our brains don't just average. They create an impression that elevates the collective.
It's quite fascinating.
So when did scientists first stumble upon this idea, and how do they begin to test something so subtle?
Well, the GA effect was first proposed and rigorously tested by a team led by Van Osh and colleagues. They embarked on a comprehensive series of 9 experiments, all designed to explore this intriguing concept.
9 experiments, that's thorough.
Very. What they consistently found was that group impressions of physical attractiveness were unequivocally more positive than the average ratings of the individual members within those groups.
Yeah.
They reported that the effect size, which is a measure of the strength of the relationship between variables, was medium to large, a quite substantial finding in psychological research.
Medium to large, that's significant.
It is. And importantly, they also discovered that this effect was moderated by group size, meaning the more people in the group, the stronger this group attractiveness boost became.
Ah, so bigger groups, bigger effect.
Exactly. It was a foundational piece of work.
Now, a critical question in psychology, especially when dealing with phenomena initially observed predominantly in Western societies, is whether these findings actually generalize to other cultures.
Absolutely crucial question.
Because, let's be honest, what's considered attractive and how we process social information can be perceived very differently across the globe.
Absolutely. That's precisely why the work by Pang and colleagues in 2020 was so crucial. They specifically focused on collectivist cultures, using China as their primary study ground.
Okay, focusing on China. Why was that so important?
You see, most initial findings on attractiveness effects, including Van Osh's pioneering work, were indeed rooted in Western cultural contexts, which often emphasize individualism.
Right.
So a key question for researchers became, would these fascinating effects hold true in societies that emphasize group cohesiveness, social harmony, and might approach attractiveness judgments with a different cultural lens?
Makes sense. Had there been other studies?
Yes, and previous studies had yielded mixed results, highlighting this very uncertainty. For instance, some earlier research in Korea by Eo and colleagues did manage to replicate the cheerleader effect,
Okay.
but their findings suggested that group attractiveness was merely an average of its members, directly contradicting Van Osh's GA effect.
So different results there.
Exactly. And another study by Ojiro and colleagues, conducted in Japan, actually failed to replicate the cheerleader effect altogether, reporting a very small, non-significant effect.
So really inconsistent findings across Asia initially.
Right. These discrepancies underscored the absolute necessity of rigorous cross-cultural validation. Pang and L's work aimed to provide that critical insight.
And Pang et al. Really went deep with their methodology in China to tackle this. Tell us about their first major study, what they called Study I, and how they structured it to capture these subtle effects.
Okay, so Pang et al. Designed Study I with remarkable thoroughness, involving a substantial sample of over 800 Chinese participants across 3 carefully structured sub-studies. This multi-pronged approach was key to ensuring their findings were robust and generalizable within a collectivist context.
800 people, that's a big sample.
It is. In Study I, they recruited over 500 university students, ensuring a balanced mix of genders. They utilized a between-subject design.
Okay, what does between subject mean in this case?
It means different participants were assigned to different conditions. So imagine you're a participant. You'd be assigned to one of 3 conditions. Some participants would rate entire groups of people.
Like a photo of a whole group.
Exactly. Others would rate individual faces within group photos. And a third set of participants would rate individual faces presented completely alone.
Got it. So different people saw different things.
Right. This design allowed them to see if different groups of people perceived attractiveness differently depending on the context. Then, for Study Ib, they shifted to a within-subject design, recruiting another group of university students.
And within subject means?
That each individual participant rated faces in all 3 conditions: group photos, individuals within group photos, and individuals alone.
Ah, so everyone saw everything.
Correct. This allowed for a direct, person-by-person comparison, minimizing individual differences that might otherwise obscure the effects. It's generally more powerful design.
Makes sense.
And finally, to broaden the demographic beyond just university students, Study I recruited a diverse sample of organizational workers ranging widely in age. This was also a within-subject design, providing further validation across a broader segment of the population.
So students and working adults, good range.
Definitely. And across all these sub-studies, they ensured rigorous ethical standards, with participants giving informed consent and their anonymity protected. This meticulous approach speaks to the care they took to ensure their results were reliable.
So how did they actually present the photos, and what exactly were participants asked to rate? Were they just looking at faces or full body shots in this first study?
Good question. For their visual stimuli in Study I, They used photos provided by 75 university students, selected to be as diverse as possible,
Hmm.
varying genders, some with glasses, different hair lengths, a range of facial expressions,
Okay.
and crucially, a pre-tested spectrum of baseline attractiveness, categorized as high, medium, or low, based on extensive pilot testing.
So they knew roughly how attractive each person was rated individually beforehand.
Precisely. These images were then cleverly arranged into three distinct rating conditions. The first was the group rating, or GR condition, where participants rated entire groups ranging from 3 to 11 persons as a whole.
Just one rating for the whole group.
Yep. They would look at a photo and assign one attractiveness score to the entire collective. Then there was the group member rating, or GMR condition.
GMR.
Here, participants rated individuals within a group photo. Each person in the group was clearly indicated by an Arabic number, making it easy for participants to assign a distinct attractiveness rating to each individual in the group.
Okay, so rating people in the group one by one.
Right. This allowed researchers to capture how individual members were perceived when they were clearly part of a larger unit. And finally, the individual rating, or IR condition, where single persons were rated in complete isolation as if they were a solitary profile picture.
Got it. GR, GMR, IR, and how did they rate them?
Participants assessed attractiveness on a 10-point Likert scale, ranging from 1, meaning not at all attractive, to 10, meaning very attractive.
The standard cigar.
Pretty standard. While they also asked about other qualities like friendliness and social attractiveness, the primary focus of their analysis for the GA effect was squarely on physical attractiveness.
And what did Peng et al. Find about the GA effect in China based on study I? Did it hold up in a collectivist culture? Was the group rating higher than the average member rating?
Yes, it did hold up. Across all three meticulously designed sub-studies, IA, I, and I, the results were remarkably consistent and clear. The group's perceived physical attractiveness, that's the GR score, was significantly higher than the average attractiveness of its individual members, the GMR score.
Wow, consistently higher.
Consistently. This held true in virtually every comparison, providing compelling evidence. The effect sizes, while generally described as small, ranging from around 0.02 to 0.12, with one instance reaching a medium effect of 0.127 in study I.
Small but consistent.
Exactly. Small effect sizes in large, real-world studies are common for complex human behaviors, yet they indicate a genuine, consistent phenomenon. So despite the numerically smaller effect, this robustly confirmed the GA effect in a collectivist context.
That's a big deal for the universality argument then.
A very important validation, because it showed that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Principle for group attractiveness wasn't just a Western phenomenon. It suggested a more universal cognitive process at play.
They didn't stop there, though, did they? I recall the outline mentioning study 2 focusing just on faces. Why that specific refinement? Why strip away the bodies and context?
That's right. The researchers are very thorough, and in study 2, their goal was to eliminate any potential confounding factors that might arise from body height, body shape, or clothing, which could subtly influence attractiveness ratings.
Ah, okay, so controlling for those other visual cues.
Precisely. So this study focused exclusively on facial attractiveness. They recruited nearly 200 Chinese participants, predominantly university educated. These participants rated groups of 9 faces, systematically arranged in a 3x3 matrix.
Like a grid of faces.
Just like a grid.
Yeah.
And to ensure maximum diversity and test the generalization of their findings even further, this study incorporated a deliberate mix of Chinese and European adult faces.
Interesting. Mix of ethnicities, too.
Yes. It was also a within-subject design, meaning each participant first rated the group's overall facial attractiveness, GR, and then proceeded to rate each individual face within that specific group, GMR.
So, same person rates the grid, then rates each face in the grid.
Correct. This allowed for a very precise comparison of how individual faces were perceived when they were part of a collective facial grid versus their contribution to the overall group impression.
And what did that second study, the one focused purely on faces, show for the GA effect? Did it solidify their earlier findings?
Indeed, it did. The results of study 2, again, powerfully demonstrated that the group was perceived as more attractive than the average attractiveness of its constitutive members. Consistently, the group rating GR was higher than the average group member rating GMR.
Still higher, even with just faces.
Still higher. This difference was statistically significant for 5 out of 6 photo sets tested, with effect sizes ranging from small to medium, for instance, a partial eta squared of 0.194 for one photo set.
Oh.
This finding was particularly crucial because it directly contradicted some earlier Korean studies that had suggested group attractiveness was simply an average. Peng et al.'s work, by systematically replicating and refining, firmly established that in China, the GA effect, where the whole is perceived as more attractive than the sum of its individual parts, is indeed a consistent and robust phenomenon.
So it's not just about full body shots. It's profoundly about how our brains process faces in a group context.
Seems that way.
So what does this all mean? How does a group, by simply existing, become more attractive than the sum of its parts? What's the why behind this GA effect? It feels like there's a trick being played on our perception.
It's not a trick, but a fundamental aspect of human perception. And the research points strongly to what's known as the filter model of selective attention.
Collective attention, like we filter what we focus on.
Exactly. The mechanism is quite elegant once you think about it. When we're confronted with a group of individuals, our visual system doesn't necessarily process every single face equally or average them all perfectly. Instead, there's a natural, almost automatic tendency to preferentially gaze at, and therefore give more cognitive weight to the most attractive faces within that group.
You mean our eyes just naturally gravitate towards the most appealing people in the crowd, almost like a spotlight?
Exactly. Perfect analogy. Scientific evidence, particularly studies utilizing eye tracking technology, consistently confirms this. More attractive group members receive significantly more visual attention and longer gaze durations than their less attractive counterparts.
Eye tracking confirms this. Wow.
Yes. So if your attention is subconsciously drawn to the most appealing individuals in a group, their attractiveness exerts a disproportionately greater influence on your overall evaluation of the entire group.
So the attractive ones pull the average up, basically, because we look at them more.
That's a great way to put it. Your overall impression of the collective is naturally biased upwards by the presence and your focus on those more attractive members. This selective attention then leads to those most attractive members disproportionately influencing the group's overall perceived attractiveness.
And this selective attention mechanism, does it tie back to the what is beautiful is good stereotype we talked about earlier, that universal bias?
Absolutely. It aligns perfectly. If you're instinctively focusing on the most attractive people in a group, and attractive people are stereotypically associated with a host of positive qualities, being friendly, socially desirable, competent,
Right.
then your overall impression of the group will also be tinged with these positive associations. This what is beautiful is good stereotype, which was initially observed and extensively studied in Western cultures, appears to be a much more universal phenomenon, crossing cultural boundaries. What's also intriguing is the robustness of this GA effect, Peng et al., found that it was consistently observed regardless of the order in which participants rated attractiveness.
Oh, really? So it didn't matter if they rated the group first or individuals first?
Didn't matter. Whether they rated the group first and then the individuals, or vice versa, the group consistently appeared more attractive than the average of its members. This suggests it's a fundamental cognitive bias, deeply ingrained in our perception, not merely a result of the experimental procedure or the order in which we encounter information.
That's quite a powerful, almost unconscious bias at play. Now, you mentioned earlier that Van Osch et al. Found group size moderates the GA effect, meaning the more people in a group, the stronger the effect. Did Peng et al. Also see this more the merrier effect in China?
Yes, they did, which further strengthened the universality of this finding. Peng et al. Successfully replicated Van Osch et al., finding that the larger the group size, the larger the GA effect.
Okay, so it holds up cross-culturally, too.
It does. To give you a concrete example from their study, Ella, when the number of individuals in a photo increased from just 3 to 8, both the group rating, GR, and the average group member rating, GMR, increased, but crucially, the difference between them, the GA effect, became even more pronounced.
So the boost gets bigger with more people.
Exactly. The collective perceived attractiveness boost was greater in larger groups.
And how does that selective attention theory explain that? Why would a larger group amplify the effect?
It makes perfect sense if you consider the selective attention theory further. As a group grows larger, there are simply more objects of interest, more faces to potentially focus on.
More potential targets for our attention.
Precisely. This means that if there are any highly attractive individuals within that larger group, they can exert an even greater influence on the overall group judgment. Imagine a large crowd. Your eyes are more likely to find and fixate on the most attractive faces, and in a larger group, there's a higher probability of encountering such faces.
Right, just statistically more likely to have standouts.
Exactly. Those highly attractive individuals then pull up your overall assessment of the entire group to a greater degree, leading to a larger deviation from a simple, unweighted average attractiveness.
It's like finding a few exceptionally shiny diamonds in a bigger pile of stones makes the whole pile seem significantly more valuable and appealing.
A very apt analogy indeed. It's about the salience of the most attractive elements within the larger set.
Is there any other reason proposed?
Yes, another proposed reason for the group size moderation is what's called a priming effect.
Priming. How does that work?
Well, the idea is that as the number of individuals increases, it subtly activates an internal representation of relative quantity in our minds, which then can directly affect our judgments of the average. So the sheer number of people subtly influences how we process and evaluate the collective, making the ensemble effect more pronounced.
Huh. So just seeing more people primes us to rate higher.
It's one hypothesis. It's likely a fascinating interplay of visual attention, cognitive averaging, and maybe even numerical processing.
All right, so that was the group attractiveness effect, where the whole group looks better than its individual parts. But then there's its more famous cousin, the cheerleader effect, which is about an individual looking better when they are seen in a crowd rather than when they're alone. Let's dive into that.
Indeed. The cheerleader effect refers to the specific phenomenon where an individual person is perceived to be more attractive when seen as a member of a group than when seen in complete isolation.
So the focus shifts from the group's overall appeal to how the group context affects my perception of one person within it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very specific and intriguing perception shift that directly impacts how we evaluate a single person based on their social context.
And if you're a fan of American TV shows, you might remember this effect gained popular mention from an episode of How I Met Your Mother, where it was colloquially described as a girl looking more attractive in a group of girls than alone.
That's the one. Hilarious. And as it turns out, scientifically accurate. It's remarkable how pop culture sometimes stumbles onto genuine psychological phenomena.
It really is. So who actually tested this scientifically first?
While the TV show brought it into popular lexicon, researchers named Walker and Vull provided the first robust empirical support for this effect in a laboratory setting. They systematically presented individual facial images, sometimes in groups and sometimes in isolation, to participants.
Okay.
Their findings unequivocally confirmed higher attractiveness ratings for individuals when they were seen within a group context compared to when they were alone. This gave the popular culture concept real scientific footing, showing it wasn't just a comedic observation, but a measurable cognitive bias.
After Walker and Vull's foundational work, did this effect also get tested across different cultures? Because, as we discussed with the GA effect, we've seen mixed results in some regions for group attractiveness. Is the cheerleader effect truly universal?
Yes, subsequent studies aim to explore the generalization of the cheerleader effect across various cultures. For instance, the effect was replicated in a Korean cultural context by EO and colleagues,
Okay, replicated in Korea.
suggesting it wasn't confined to Western populations. However, a study by Ojiro and colleagues in Japan failed to find a significant effect, reporting a very small, non-significant effect size.
Ah, so Japan was different again. Failed to replicate.
Right. This highlights the importance of cross-cultural validation. What holds true in one region isn't guaranteed to be identical elsewhere, and cultural nuances can certainly play a role in the magnitude or presence of such effects.
Any other places?
Interestingly, on the other side of the globe, Carragher and colleagues found the cheerleader effect to be a robust phenomenon in Australia, another individualistic culture, and they noted it was present regardless of the spatial arrangement of faces.
Okay, so strong in Australia, it really underscores why continued cross-cultural research is so vital in psychology.
Absolutely.
So how did Peng et al. In China, who were already meticulously studying the GA effect, also manage to test the cheerleader effect in their study I? Did they use the same setup?
They leveraged the exact same meticulously collected samples and photostimuli they used for the GA effect in study I, that's study IA, I, and IG, which included both university students and organizational workers across different experimental designs.
Okay, same people, same photos.
Exactly. This time, their analysis for the cheerleader effect involved directly comparing the individual ratings, IR, where a person was rated alone, to the group member ratings, GMR, where that same person was rated while visually part of a group photo.
So Comparing the alone rating to the in the group rating for the same person.
Precisely. Essentially, they were asking, does the same person appear more attractive when you know they are part of a group, even if you were just evaluating them as an individual?
And what were their findings? Was the cheerleader effect present in China too, given the mixed results from Korea and Japan?
The results from Peng et al.'s work in China were quite clear and compelling. Across all three sub-studies, from the university students in both between-subject and within-subject designs, to the organizational workers in the within-subject design individuals, were consistently rated as more attractive when they were seen within a group context, GMR, compared to when they were seen completely alone, IR.
So consistently more attractive in the group context in China as well.
Consistently. The differences were statistically significant in the vast majority of cases, with partial eta-squared values indicating effect sizes ranging from small to quite large. In many instances, the effect sizes they observed in China were even stronger than those reported in some previous studies, such as Ojiro et al.'s work in Japan.
Wow, sometimes even stronger effects. So this firmly confirmed the cheerleader effect in a large collectivist culture like China, adding significant weight to its universality.
It really did.
This is where it truly becomes fascinating. How does simply being part of a group seemingly enhance an individual's attractiveness? It almost feels like a cognitive illusion. What's the proposed mechanism here?
It's not magic, but it is a clever cognitive trick, as you said. Walker and Voll, in their original scientific confirmation of the cheerleader effect, proposed a three-part cognitive explanation rooted in how our visual system processes multiple items simultaneously.
Okay, 3 parts. What's the first one?
First, they theorized about ensemble representation. When presented with a group of faces, our visual system doesn't necessarily scrutinize each face in minute detail immediately. Instead, it automatically and rapidly computes an ensemble representation, which is essentially a kind of statistical average or a gist of those faces.
So the brain quickly gets the overall average look of the group.
Exactly. Our brain quickly grasps the collective attractiveness, the overall vibe of the group. Think of it like a quick summary of the whole.
Okay, ensemble representation. What's next?
Second, they proposed a bias towards average. Once this ensemble average is formed, individual members of the group are then perceived to be biased towards this average. Our memory for individual items tends to be pulled towards the average of the group they were seen in.
So my perception of you gets pulled towards the average look of your friends.
Sort of, yes. So if the group's gist is attractive, your perception of each individual within it subtly shifts in that direction, even if that individual isn't inherently that attractive on their own.
Interesting. And the third part?
And third, and crucially, they pointed out the attractiveness of average faces. This is a well-established finding in facial attractiveness research. Average faces are often considered more attractive than individual faces.
Wait, average faces are more attractive. How does that work?
It seems counterintuitive, I know, because we often celebrate unique beauty. But when scientists digitally average many individual faces to create a composite morph face, these average faces are frequently rated as more attractive than any of the individual faces that contributed to them.
Why? Why are average faces seen as better looking?
Well, the theory is they tend to be more symmetrical, they have fewer unique flaws or idiosyncrasies, and they might represent a kind of central tendency that our brains find appealing, perhaps signaling health or genetic fitness. It's a remarkably consistent finding across cultures.
Huh, okay. So average faces are attractive. Got it. How do these 3 things together explain the cheerleader effect?
The synthesis of these 3 cognitive phenomena, the rapid ensemble representation, the biasing of individual perception towards that average, and the inherent attractiveness of average faces leads to individuals being rated as more attractive when in a group.
So my brain averages the group, that average is generally attractive, and my perception of each person gets nudged towards that attractive average.
That's the core idea proposed by Walker and Voll. And this holds true whether the individual is presented via a full body image, as in Peng et al.'s study 4, or exclusively via a facial image, as in their study 2. It profoundly underscores that our evaluation of a person's attractiveness is not just about their inherent physical features, but is profoundly influenced by the environmental context and the other group members they happen to be with.
It's like our brain takes a shortcut, and that shortcut happens to flatter the individual.
That's a good way to think about it.
So the cheerleader effect boosts attractiveness, and there's this proposed brain mechanism involving averaging. But does that mechanism fully explain it? Is it the complete story, or are there other factors at play that fine-tune this effect? Is it always that simple?
That's an excellent question, and recent work suggests the story is indeed more complex than initially thought. While the ensemble encoding and hierarchical memory theory was a valuable starting point, subsequent research by Carragher and colleagues in 2019, for instance, provided what they termed limited evidence for hierarchical encoding being the primary or sole cause.
Limited evidence. So maybe averaging isn't the whole picture.
It suggests that yes, this means scientists are constantly refining their understanding.
How do they test that? How do you poke holes in a theory about how our brains average faces? Seems tricky.
They conducted a series of clever experiments to directly challenge the core assumptions of the hierarchical encoding mechanism. In their first experiment, they looked at the impact of variance within group images.
Variance, like how different the faces in the group are?
Exactly. They introduced an identical distractors task where a target face was shown alongside identical images of itself as distractors.
Okay, so the target face surrounded by copies of itself.
Precisely. The logical prediction, based on the hierarchical encoding theory, was that there should be no cheerleader effect here, because there's no average to be more attractive than the individual if all images are exactly the same.
Makes sense. If there's no variation, there's nothing to average towards.
Right. Yet, surprisingly, a reduced but still statistically significant cheerleader effect still occurred.
Whoa. So even with identical images, there was still a boost. That definitely challenges the idea that the effect is purely about averaging different faces.
Exactly. It suggested something else might be at play beyond just statistical averaging. They also conducted a self-distractors task, where a target was shown with different photographs of the same person.
Okay, different pictures, but of the same individual.
Yes. Here, the cheerleader effect was found, and its size was similar to a control group that used unique distractors.
So what's the implication here?
The implication from these combined findings is significant. The continued presence of the effect, even with identical images, suggests that while variability among group members might modulate or strengthen the effect, hierarchical encoding, which fundamentally relies on variance for forming an average, isn't the only mechanism driving it. It pointed towards other contributing factors.
Okay, so maybe averaging plays a role, but it's not the only thing going on.
That seems to be the direction the evidence is pointing.
And they went even further to challenge this. They used what they called morph faces in experiment 2. What exactly are these morph faces, and what did they reveal that caused such a critical contradiction?
Good question. Morph faces are essentially digitally averaged faces. Researchers create them by layering and blending many individual faces together, often from a specific group, to create a single composite face.
Like those composites you sometimes see online.
Exactly. These morph faces are a powerful tool because they serve as a direct, tangible proxy for that mentally summarized ensemble representation that the hierarchical encoding theory proposes our brains create.
Okay, so the morph face is the average face.
Pretty much.
Right.
The findings initially supported a part of the theory. The morph faces were indeed perceived to be significantly more attractive than the individual faces that made them up.
So confirming again that average is attractive.
Exactly. This confirmed the widely accepted principle that average is attractive.
So the average is more attractive, but then what was the crucial contradiction that challenged the theory? Where did it fall apart?
Here's where the contradiction lies. They found that there was no significant correlation between the size of the cheerleader effect experienced by a target face and the attractiveness of the morph face of its group.
Wait, run that by me again. No correlation
Between how much more attractive a person looked in the group, the cheerleader effect size, and how attractive the group's average face, the morph face, actually was.
Huh. Why is that a contradiction?
Think about it. If the individual's attractiveness were truly biased towards an attractive ensemble average, then a stronger, more attractive ensemble average, represented by the morph face, should logically lead to a stronger cheerleader effect for the individual. The more attractive the average, the bigger the boost for everyone pulled towards it.
Right, that makes sense.
But this was not observed. The two weren't connected in that predictive way. Therefore, these findings offered limited evidence for hierarchical encoding as the primary or sole cause of the cheerleader effect, strongly suggesting that other, as yet unidentified or less understood, mechanisms must be explored.
Wow, so the average face is attractive, but it doesn't seem to be the reason individuals look better in a group, or at least not the only reason.
Precisely. The story of how this effect works is clearly more nuanced than a simple averaging process.
It sounds like the plot thickens for understanding the why. Beyond what's happening in our brains with averages, did the physical arrangement of the group matter at all? For instance, if someone is on the left versus the right side of a photo, does that change anything, given what we know about how our visual perception works, like left field bias?
That's a great question, given what we know about how our visual fields process information, including phenomena like pseudo-neglect, where we sometimes pay disproportionate attention to the left side of our visual field. Carragher and colleagues, in a separate 2018 study, directly investigated this.
Okay, what did they look at specifically?
They explored whether the spatial arrangement of faces in a group, for example, where the distractor faces were placed relative to the target face, left visual field, right visual field, or bilaterally, or even where the target face itself was positioned within the group, left, center, or right, would influence the cheerleader effect.
So, does where you are in the picture matter?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They wanted to see if simply where a face appeared on a screen would impact its attractiveness boost.
And what did they find? Was the cheerleader effect sensitive to these spatial cues? Did location matter?
The answer was quite definitive, no. In their first experiment, where the target face was always in the center and distractor faces were placed in various configurations around it, the cheerleader effect was consistently observed in all group configurations.
Okay, consistent effect regardless of where the others were.
Right. And crucially, the spatial arrangement of those distractor faces simply did not modulate the effect size. It didn't make it stronger or weaker.
And what about where the target person was placed?
Similarly, in their second experiment, where they manipulated the target face's own location to be in the left visual field, center, or right visual field of the group, the effect was again consistently present. The spatial location of the target face did not influence the magnitude of the cheerleader effect either.
So it's a pretty robust phenomenon then, not easily swayed by how faces are spatially positioned within a small group. That's surprising given how sensitive our visual system can be to spatial information.
Exactly. This indicates that the cheerleader effect is a remarkably robust phenomenon and not easily swayed by how faces are spatially positioned within a small group. This finding aligns with the idea that ensemble coding, that rapid overarching summary our brain creates of a group, can quickly summarize complex visual scenes regardless of the precise individual item locations.
So the brain just grabs the gist regardless of the layout.
It seems the overall gist of the group forms relatively independently of the specific spatial layout. It suggests a higher level cognitive processing is at play rather than just simple visual field biases.
That's fascinating. And what about viewing time? Sometimes when we have less time to scrutinize a face, it can actually seem more attractive. Could the cheerleader effect simply be an artifact or an inflation due to methodological issues, like people viewing target faces in group conditions for less time than in alone conditions?
That was indeed a very important methodological concern that needed to be addressed, and Carragher and colleagues tackled it directly in their 2020 study. The concern was valid.
Yeah, because if you just get a quick glance.
Right. If participants spent less time viewing an individual in a group setting compared to when that same individual was presented alone, that time difference could artificially inflate the group rating, as longer viewing times can sometimes decrease perceived attractiveness due to more scrutiny. They aimed to definitively debunk this potential confound.
So how did they do it? How did they systematically manipulate viewing time to ensure a fair test?
They designed a study where they systematically manipulated the uncued presentation time of the group image. This means the time the entire group photo was displayed before the participant made their judgment.
Okay, how long the whole group was shown?
Exactly. They varied this presentation time drastically from a very brief 300 milliseconds, less than half a second, barely a glance, all the way up to a prolonged 7,000 milliseconds, or 7 full seconds, which is ample time for detailed scrutiny.
Wow, big range. From blink and you miss it to a long stare?
Precisely.
Wow.
And crucially, throughout all these variations, the cued target view time, the moment when participants were instructed to specifically rate one individual, was kept constant. This allowed them to directly test if the duration of exposure to the group context mattered for the cheerleader effect.
And the results, did presentation time affect the cheerleader effect, or did it hold strong regardless of how long they saw the group?
The findings were exceptionally clear and robust.
Mm-hmm.
The cheerleader effect occurred in every single presentation time condition tested.
Every single one, from 300 meters to 7 seconds.
Every single one. From the briefest glance at 300 milliseconds to the extended scrutiny at 7,000 milliseconds, individuals were consistently rated as more attractive when in a group. And Critically, the magnitude of the effect did not change across these widely varied presentation times.
The size of the effect was the same. That's huge.
It really is. This powerfully demonstrated that the presentation time discrepancy does not contribute to the size of the typical cheerleader effect. It's not just about getting a quicker glance. The effect is deeper than that.
That's a significant piece of evidence that truly solidifies the robustness of the cheerleader effect. And it also adds more complexity to the hierarchical encoding theory, doesn't it? Since that theory relies on rapid ensemble processing, if it happens even with long viewing times.
It absolutely does. This finding provides further strong evidence against hierarchical encoding as the sole mechanism explaining the cheerleader effect. You see, ensemble coding, which is a prerequisite for hierarchical encoding, becomes less relevant with longer viewing times, typically beyond about 1,500 milliseconds, because observers then have enough time to process individual faces one by one.
Right, you can look at each person individually if you have 7 seconds.
Exactly. Yet the cheerleader effect persisted even at 7,000 milliseconds. This suggests that the mechanism isn't entirely dependent on that rapid ensemble-based averaging. Our brains seem to apply this attractiveness boost even when given ample time to process individual details, pointing to other cognitive factors at play.
Speaking of other factors, the outline mentioned a critical role for group composition and baseline attractiveness. This is from McDowell and Starratt's 2019 study. It sounds like it's not just about being in a group, but who you're in the group with. How does that work?
Precisely. While the core cheerleader effect is robust, its magnitude and even its presence aren't universal. McDowell and Starratt's conceptual replication explored specific moderating factors, moving beyond the simple presence of a group to consider the quality of that group.
Okay, the quality of the group, what did they do?
They used headshots of male and female targets, but crucially, they categorized these targets by their baseline attractiveness, low, moderate, or high, based on independent ratings.
So like paying at all, knowing how attractive people were rated alone first.
Yes. These targets were then presented alone or in groups with others of similar attractiveness levels, like all highs together or all lows together.
Okay.
Or, most interestingly, in groups with others of mixed attractiveness levels. Example, a group containing 2 lows, 2 moderate, and 2 high attractiveness individuals.
A mixed bag group.
Right. And participants rated not just physical attractiveness, but also value as a short-term and long-term romantic partner, which adds a layer of practical relevance.
Ah, looking at mate value too. Interesting. So what did they discover about the critical role of group composition and how it affects perceived attractiveness? When was the effect strongest?
Their findings revealed some fascinating nuances. The cheerleader effect was most evident and provided the biggest boost when targets were presented in a mixed group, that is, a group containing individuals of varying attractiveness levels.
So the mixed groups were key.
Exactly. These targets were rated more highly than when presented singly or even when presented in a group of others of similar attractiveness. This suggests that the diversity and attractiveness within a group can be a powerful amplifier.
Okay, what about differences for men and women?
Now, for female attractiveness, the results were particularly intriguing. Attractiveness ratings for females significantly increased when presented in a mixed group. But here's the counterintuitive part. Being in a group of similarly attractive females actually decreased a target's perceived attractiveness.
Wow, that's a real twist. So if I'm a woman, I should pick a group where I'm not surrounded by people who are all equally attractive as me, or even more so. Maybe being the standout helps.
That's certainly one interpretation for women based on this study. It's almost like a strong, uniform group diminishes individual sparkle, or maybe contrast effects come into play more strongly.
What about for men? Did they see the same thing?
Now, for male attractiveness, the findings were quite surprising. There was no significant cheerleader effect for ratings of male physical attractiveness in this specific study.
No effect for men's faces at all.
Not for physical attractiveness based on these headshots. This suggests that for males, facial features alone might be less central to perceived attractiveness than for females. It's possible that other factors like body shape, height, or even indicators of status might play a larger and more complex role for male attractiveness, which weren't fully captured in this headshot-only study.
Interesting. So the effect might be more about faces for women, but other things matter more for men in groups.
That's one possibility this study raises. It highlights the importance of considering gender differences when studying attractiveness.
That's a significant difference between genders. Did they extend these findings beyond just physical beauty to something like mate value, meaning someone's potential as a romantic partner? Did the group affect that?
They absolutely did, which makes the study's implications even broader. They extended the cheerleader effect to assessments of mate value, a person's potential worth as a sexual or romantic partner, both short-term and long-term. This moves beyond a purely aesthetic judgment to a more practical evolutionary one.
Okay, and what drove the boost in mate value? Was it just being in any group?
Not just any group. They found that an increase in perceived mate value for both long-term and short-term partner potential occurred under two specific critical conditions. First, the group had to contain at least some highly attractive individuals.
So it needed some stars in the group.
Right. Simply being in any group wasn't enough. There had to be some shining lights in the collective. Second, the individual being evaluated themselves had to meet a minimum level of baseline attractiveness.
Ah, okay, so if someone was extremely low in attractiveness to begin with, the group effect might not be a magic fix.
Exactly. There seems to be a floor effect, potentially.
And were there gender differences in how this mate value boost worked? Because the attractiveness findings were different.
Yes, very pronounced ones, offering fascinating insights into mating strategies. For female targets, the minimum standard of attractiveness appeared to be quite low. All female targets in their study, from the least to the most attractive, received a boost in perceived value, both as a long-term and short-term partner, when grouped with highly attractive females.
All females got a boost if grouped with attractive women.
Pretty much. This suggests a greater flexibility in how women benefit from group context in terms of perceived mate value. It's almost as if, for women, proximity to attractive peers casts a positive halo, regardless of their individual baseline.
Okay, what about the men? Was it the same?
For male targets, it was more specific and nuanced. The most attractive males were rated as more valuable short-term partners when in a group of similarly highly attractive males.
So, top-tier men benefit from being with other top-tier men for short-term appeal.
Seems that way in this study. Moderately attractive males were rated as more valuable long-term partners when in a mixed group, but surprisingly, not as short-term partners.
Okay, so moderate men get a long-term boost in mixed groups. Why might that be?
Well, this aligns with evidence that male physical attractiveness is often more paramount for females' short-term mating strategies, while other traits, perhaps highlighted by contrast in a mixed group, might be prioritized for long-term commitment.
Interesting distinction. And the least attractive men.
And critically, the least attractive males received no boost in either long-term or short-term value from being grouped with more attractive males.
So the floor effect was real for men in this case.
It seems for some, group context isn't a magic fix. There might be a baseline below which the effect doesn't apply to men, at least in terms of mate value derived from proximity to attractive others. This really underscores how complex attractiveness and mate value judgments are, varying by gender and the specific context of the group.
So our deep dive today has truly revealed some incredibly powerful and well-replicated phenomena. The group attractiveness effect and the cheerleader effect consistently show that both groups as a whole and individuals within them can be perceived as more attractive than their standalone average.
Definitely well-established effects now.
And these effects are surprisingly robust, holding true across different cultures, individualistic ones like the US and Australia, and collectivist ones like China, and various experimental conditions, resisting manipulations of spatial arrangement and presentation time.
Yeah, they seem pretty fundamental.
It really shows our perception of beauty is far from static.
Yes, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it means that our judgments of attractiveness are not just about inherent static physical features. They are deeply influenced by the social frame, the immediate context in which we encounter someone.
Right.
It underscores the profound importance of environmental and contextual factors in how we perceive beauty, suggesting that group context truly can yield advantages for increasing people's attractiveness. It's a testament to the dynamic nature of human perception.
So knowing all this, it makes you wonder what the current state of this research is and what's next for attractiveness studies. What are the evolving theories now that hierarchical encoding isn't seen as the sole explanation? What's the new framework emerging? If it's not just averaging, what is it?
The field is definitely moving towards a more nuanced, multi-mechanism framework, acknowledging the complexity. While the initial hierarchical encoding theory provided a valuable starting point and helped us understand some aspects, subsequent research, as we discussed, has shown it has limited evidence for being the sole cause.
Right, the Carragher studies.
Exactly. Emerging research, particularly from Carragher and colleagues in 2019, and Ying and colleagues also in 2019, points towards a more comprehensive two-mechanism account.
Two mechanisms. Tell us about them. How did they work together to explain these effects? What's the first one?
The first mechanism is what they call social inference. This proposes that an initial general increase in attractiveness occurs simply because being seen in a group causes the observer to infer that the target face is more desirable or has been endorsed by being part of a social unit.
Okay, so just being in a group makes me seem more socially validated or desirable.
That's the idea. Think about it. If someone is part of a group, our brain might quickly assume they possess some positive social qualities that make them appealing to others simply by virtue of being accepted into that group. This happens somewhat automatically, regardless of the other group members' specific characteristics.
Like a basic social proof kind of thing.
You could see it that way. It's a broad, initial, almost subconscious boost that comes from the social context itself.
Okay, social inference. What's the second mechanism?
The second mechanism is a contrast effect. This then modulates the magnitude of this initial attractiveness change based on the relative attractiveness of the other faces in the group compared to the target face.
Ah, so this brings back the idea of who is in the group mattering.
Precisely. For example, if a moderately attractive person is placed in a group of generally unattractive individuals, the contrast effect might lead to a larger increase in their perceived attractiveness, making them stand out even more positively.
Making them look better by comparison.
Right. Conversely, as we saw in McDowell and Starrat's findings for female attractiveness, being in a group of similarly highly attractive individuals could, counterintuitively, sometimes decrease a target's perceived attractiveness.
Right, the finding where being with equally attractive women made a woman look less attractive.
Exactly, perhaps due to a relative contrast that makes them seem less unique or exceptional within that high attractiveness context. It's a much more dynamic and complex picture than just simple averaging. Social inference gives a base boost, contrast effects then tweak it up or down.
That's a much more complex and dynamic picture. It sounds like our brains are doing a lot more nuanced calculation. So, given these evolving theories, what are the big gaps in our knowledge, and what exciting research directions are scientists pursuing now to fill those gaps?
There are several compelling avenues for future research. First, the social inference mechanism, while conceptually clear, is still somewhat abstract. Future research needs to delve deeper into its precise nature. How exactly do we infer desirability from group presence? What specific social cues or cognitive processes drive this inference?
Yeah, how does that social proof actually work in the brain?
Good question. Second, more detailed work is needed to fully map out precisely how the contrast between group members' attractiveness levels influences individual ratings. We know it modulates the effect, but understanding the precise parameters and thresholds of this modulation is crucial. When does contrast help? When does it hurt? And by how much?
Right, getting more specific about those contrast effects.
Third, a very exciting direction involves integrating physiological data, like advanced eye tracking, which we've already seen used, with neural factors. By understanding the underlying brain processes driving these effects, what parts of the brain are activated, what neural pathways are involved, using techniques like fMRI.
Seeing what the brain is actually doing.
Exactly. We can gain a much deeper understanding of the how.
And what about the gender differences that McDowell and Starrat touched upon? It seemed like the effects varied significantly for men and women. That feels like a big area to explore more.
Absolutely. A more detailed analysis of gender effects is crucial. This includes exploring how participant gender-do men and women rate attractiveness differently. And same, versus opposite gender ratings play a role.
Like, does a woman evaluate a group of men differently than a man evaluates a group of women?
Precisely. Also, understanding how different attractiveness cues beyond just faces, such as body shape, height, and even vocal characteristics for males, might influence the group effect is important, as many initial studies primarily focused on static facial images.
Getting beyond just headshots.
Exactly. And of course, expanding research to even more diverse populations and ethnicities beyond just China would also significantly strengthen the generalizability and universality of these findings.
Makes sense. Now, this research is primarily about physical attractiveness. Does the cheerleader effect, or GA effect, extend to perceptions of other traits, like trustworthiness or intelligence, which are often correlated with attractiveness anyway, due to that what is beautiful is good stereotype?
That's a ripe and fascinating area for exploration. It's a key question whether these effects are specific only to attractiveness judgments, or if they generalize to perceptions of other positive traits.
Yeah, does the group make you look smarter too?
Right.
Or more competent?
It makes logical sense that they might, given that the what is beautiful is good stereotype often attributes competence, trustworthiness, and intelligence to attractive individuals. For instance, Would a group of people seem more intelligent as a collective than their individual average? Or would an individual in a group be perceived as more trustworthy? Investigating these broader trait perceptions could reveal how deeply integrated these group context effects are in our overall social judgments. It's a really interesting potential expansion.
So we know these effects exist and are remarkably robust, potentially giving an individual a subtle boost in perceived attractiveness. But what does that actually mean for you in your daily life? Can this small increase, perhaps 1.5% to 2%, as some studies suggest, actually translate into observable, meaningful, real-world benefits? What are the practical applications, even if they are still somewhat speculative?
This raises an important question, and it's where much of the practical speculation and future research truly lie. While previous works have certainly speculated on these applications, concrete empirical evidence of the impact of these small attractiveness boosts in large-scale real-world scenarios is still needed. But we can certainly hypothesize about where these effects might be leveraged.
Like online dating and social media, which are so visually driven now, that seems like an obvious place.
Precisely. Consider online dating apps or social media. Could strategically posting more group photographs rather than solely individual headshots actually lead to more matches, more dates, or more positive attention? The theory suggests it might give a subtle, advantageous boost to your profile.
So maybe don't just post selfies. Mix in some group shots.
Potentially, yes. Then, in the vast world of advertising and marketing, brands could potentially leverage these effects. By using groups of individuals, perhaps attractive ones, as spokespersons in advertisements, they might make their products or services seem more appealing.
How so?
The idea here is that the adoption of a group of advertising spokespersons may be more likely to be noticed and welcomed by consumers, perhaps subconsciously associating the product with positive group attributes.
Making the product seem more popular or socially desirable by association.
Exactly.
And what about the entertainment world? Talent shows, reality TV, you mentioned celebrities earlier.
Absolutely. Think about entertainment and talent shows. The inclusion of celebrities or already attractive individuals alongside contestants might increase audience appreciation and viewership. The theory here is that the inclusion of celebrities in a show's cast may be more likely to be appreciated and viewed by the audience.
Because the whole group just looks better.
Potentially, yes, due to these group attractiveness effects creating a more appealing overall ensemble. It's about enhancing the overall visual experience and appeal.
It sounds like it could even apply in professional settings, like a business negotiation. That seems a bit more controversial, though.
It definitely could, and yes, it treads into more sensitive territory. In business and management negotiations, for instance, could the selection and combination of a team with generally more attractive members increase a partner's evaluation of the whole team, or even the company they represent?
Hmm.
Could this subtly help to achieve negotiation agreements by fostering a more positive first impression? This is certainly an area for fascinating, albeit maybe ethically tricky, further investigation.
Yeah, you wouldn't want hiring decisions based on this.
Absolutely not, but understanding the bias is important, and then looking at broader social and even mating strategies, particularly for women.
Right.
Given that men across cultures often place a greater importance on physical attractiveness in prospective partners.
Right.
Choosing a group that, through these effects, can enhance one's perceived attractiveness could be a subtle but strategic move. It's about optimizing one's presentation in a social context.
So choosing your wing women or wingmen strategically, perhaps.
You could frame it that way. These are all fascinating possibilities, but again, the concrete evidence of the tangible impact of these small boosts in these real-world scenarios is what future research truly needs to focus on. Does that 2% boost actually get you the date or the deal? That's the next frontier for this field.
Right. Moving from the lab to the real-world impact.
Exactly. Hashtag hack outro.
Okay, so our deep dive today has revealed that the group attractiveness effect and the cheerleader effect are powerful, well-replicated phenomena. They consistently show that both groups as a whole and individuals within them can be perceived as more attractive than their standalone average.
They really are robust findings.
And these effects are surprisingly persistent, holding true across different cultures and various experimental conditions, revealing that our perception of beauty is far from static or purely individual.
Yeah, context really matters. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means that our judgments of attractiveness are not just about inherent physical features. They are profoundly influenced by the social frame, the immediate context in which we encounter someone.
Hmm.
It seems the group context truly can yield advantages for increasing people's attractiveness, underscoring the deep importance of environmental and contextual factors in how we perceive beauty and make social judgments.
So, what does this all mean for you listening? The next time you're scrolling through social media, looking at group photos, or even judging a team on a reality show, remember the subtle psychological dance happening in your mind.
That unconscious processing.
Exactly. This raises an important question, maybe a provocative thought to leave you with. Knowing that merely being in a group can boost perceived attractiveness, how might you apply this knowledge? Maybe strategically, maybe just being aware.
Hmm.
And perhaps more importantly, how might you critically evaluate your own instant judgments of others in groups? It's a fascinating thought to mull over. Are you truly seeing the individual, or are you being swayed by the collective?
A really interesting question to reflect on. How much is the person and how much is the context influencing your view?
Definitely something to think about next time you're people watching.